Hi, everybody. My name is Nicole Mancini, and welcome to our panel all about being an author. I'm here with several middle grade authors who are excited to talk to us all about their life and what it's like creating stories for students as well as your family members. So before I jump in and give everybody a chance to introduce themselves, I just wanted to say again who I am. My name is Nicole Mancini. I teach 5th grade English language arts in New Jersey, and I am also writing my own middle grade book, so I am super excited for this. So this is kind of self-serving for me in a way, so I'm excited to hear all of the answers that we have to the questions. And I'm going to give them a chance to introduce themselves. So Mae, why don't we start with you?
Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. My name is Mae Respico, and I write primarily contemporary middle grade fiction. And since this is a book about behind the scenes, I'm going to show my covers. This is The House That Lou Built, Any Day With You, which is my pandemic book. And then my book that comes out in less than a couple of months now in September called How to Win a Slime War.
Okay, let's go on to Amy.
Hello, thanks for having me. I write from New Hampshire. My first book was The Unforgettable Guinevere St. Clair. That was 2018. And about a week and a day ago, 10,000 Tries came out. Both realistic middle grade fiction. Thank you. And both books centered around family relationships, drama, and best friends. And this one, both of them actually deal with I teach anatomy, and that seems to weave its way into both books. So a lot about the brain in there as well.
That sounds fascinating. I like that. I guess I'm going to have to go get that one now. Leslie.
Hi there, I'm Leslie C. Youngblood, and I write realistic fiction, and I love it. I'm so happy you have a book coming out, Nicole, and how everyone. So my first book was Love Like Sky. I don't know if you see Georgie there. That's my main character, Georgie. And my most recent book, Forever This Summer, just published July 6th. So it's been a whirlwind. And my girls are joining me and back there in large form too. They like to hang around. So happy to be here. Happy to hear what everyone has to say.
Jarrett.
Thank you. I am the author of the Engine Nerds series of middle grade novels. And also for middle grade readers, I have some activity books, Give This Book a Title and Give This Book a Cover. And next year, Engine Nerds are a little bit sci-fi fantasy, sort of left of reality. But next year, I've got my first sort of realistic fiction out. So I'm excited about trying that out. Yeah, thanks for having me.
And last but not least, Laurie.
Hi, everyone. I'm so happy to be here with this group. So I also write realistic fiction. I write about deeply feeling kids who mess up and bounce back and figure out what it means to be strong in their own way. So my first book, which I co-wrote with my friend Cordelia Jensen, is Every Shiny Thing. And then my next book was Up for Air. And my most recent release is called St. Ivy, and it just came out in May.
Awesome.
We have some amazing types of books here, and I have read almost all of your books. I know we have some that are coming out, and I'm going to get those. Definitely getting yours, Amy. I think I have an idea for our science class at school. But, when I know for me, I'm currently, as I said, I am writing a middle grade book, and it's something that I've been wanting to do for so long. And as an educator, time obviously is tricky to play with. So that creativity aspect is hard to work with during the school year. But now that it's the summertime, I have been going full steam ahead. So that brings me to my first question. And I'm going to ask Mae if she would respond first. Where do you get your ideas from your books? Is it something that's inspired by things that have happened in your own lives or things that you've observed? Where do you get your ideas?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And it's a question I think we all get so many, a lot as authors. And for me, it's very different from book to book. But I generally, with my books, I try to start with a theme. So my book that came out most recently, Any Day with You, that's all about change and resiliency. My first book, The House That Lou Built, was all about a girl who has a big dream. I wanted to explore what that meant. But then from there, I start playing around with details. A lot of times it's just like a little detail that might hit me. And I'm like, oh, that's what I want to explore more. And so for How to Win a Slime War, I opened up our refrigerator one night and there was a big vat of some like green glop. And I was like, what the heck is this? So I've got two boys. And it turned out that they were learning how to make slime. So this was actually a couple summers ago. And they were both so into it. At some point we had all the neighborhood kids in our home making slime, and I was finding it everywhere. And I was like, this is too much slime. But for me, seeing their excitement is what got me going. And so I actually have a whole notebook full of details that I took during that time of, what did the slime feel like? What were their reactions? What were the kids talking about? And I just sort of kept this, not knowing what I would do with it, but thinking like, oh, I wanted to write a slime book. And so that's how it started. And this was a couple years ago. And it's something I just kept on poking at until I came up with the actual plot and the storyline. But so, a little bit of theme. I also draw a lot from my childhood and growing up Filipino American. So, I try to put all those things in, but normally it starts with like one spark that just grows and grows and grows.
I love that. And it's so timely too, because kids are still into that making slime phase. I mean, there's unicorn slime, there's glow in the dark slime, there's all of these different slimes that they're
unfortunately.
It's amazing. I mean, I have two younger nephews and they're totally into the slime thing right now as well. And it's just crazy. But Amy, your book is a little bit different. Could you tell us about where you got your ideas from?
Yeah, I sometimes joke, and I'm not joking, that I'm maybe not even that creative because I just take a lot from real life. Like, for instance, in my Guinevere book, I knew a woman who was without oxygen for too long. And when she woke up, she did not remember anything after the age of 13. And I was really taken with the idea of what would it be like to be the child of your mother who didn't remember you. And then for 10,000 Tries, it really revolves around a boy. And I named him Golden Maroney because I heard the name Golden somewhere. And I just thought, oh, how do you survive middle school with that name? And so I made it, his friends call him Goldfish and Golden Macaroni and Goldilocks. And so that was fun to play with. And then, just being with middle schoolers a lot, they are so funny. I'm constantly writing things down that they say, get wrecked. And they do things that are so funny. And they, the secret circles on the bus. And I just find that when I'm really paying attention and writing it down, I feel like they give me the book. And of course you have to make it all happen and make it all sync, but they give you a lot of material if you observe it.
I definitely agree with that, including the lingo that they use, because at least for my students, by the time, the end of the year rolls around, they're in that real preteen phase and things start changing. And I remember a couple months ago, I got my first Miss M. That's so cringe. And I'm like, what is happening? Are you serious? Meanwhile, they were so innocent at the beginning of the year. So Leslie, what about you? Where do you get your ideas from?
Oh, thank you. I will say I pull a lot just from family, and not necessarily in, this is nonfiction, but my family is very colorful. We engage a lot. We talk a lot. We are always telling stories. Matter of fact, I was probably listening to stories really before I became an avid reader, just hearing my mom and grandpa and grandma talk. So those stories really engaged me. So when I think about where do I get my ideas from, it normally comes from characters first. A character, or I would see someone or just hear a way a person speaks or something they say, and it just grabs me, and I was like, wow, how would it be to spend time with that person? So I start with a character first, then that pulls me into the story, and then from there, she needs a friend, she needs a sister, so, and it grows from there. So say, for instance, with my first book, Love Like Sky, I wanted to focus on siblings. So I focused on sibling relationships. I focused on blended families. And I'm from a blended family as well. So I did pull from that. My mom and dad have been married for about 30 years. We lost a stepdad a long time ago. But that family, that connection, and I just wanted to bring that to one of my books. So I would say I pull from real life 90%, and the other is just, let the imagination flow.
I know several of my students who read Love Like Sky this past school year, and that was something that they talked about, the connection between the siblings and the characters overall. It really brought the story to life for them. And I think that's important in any type of book. You want those characters to be believable and those that kids can connect to. So getting that down is really, really important, along with having an idea for the plot.
Right. And if you've never had a sibling connection, read Love Like Sky and you'll have one. So sometimes we need to not only talk about what kids have and give them that experience, but what about things they haven't experienced? So I like to do a lot of that in my books as well.
I love that. I love that. Now, Jarrett, your characters are a lot different. You have some interesting robotic characters, but I want to hear about your ideas first. Where do they come from?
Yeah, so I think a lot of my ideas just come from curiosity and allowing myself time and space to sort of daydream. So I think that all of my stories come from the question, what if? So I think I often have experiences, some of them completely mundane and unexciting, but when you ask what if and sort of inject some other elements into it, things often get exciting. And I think sometimes I get more or less excited by an idea, and the ones I get really fired up about, I just sort of get carried away. So I didn't actually talk about this book, but in a couple months I have a graphic novel coming out. It's called The Hunger Heroes, and it's about superheroic taco ingredients. And this story all started while I was sitting at a conference in a session, and the organizers of the conference made the mistake of telling us at the beginning of the session that they were feeding us Mexican food right after the end of the next session. And I was hungry, and I couldn't concentrate. And I said, what if my food could just come and save me and just come? What if a taco could just arrive and I could eat it while I was sitting here, which the presenters probably would have been pretty bummed about. But I got a whole book series out of that single and obviously it takes years to develop that little germ of an idea. But often it's just from looking around and asking myself, what if, and sort of injecting something from my imagination into the reality that I'm experiencing.
And Laurie, all of your stories have the premises basically on these topics that are realistic that kids can connect to. So are you using things from your own life to get your ideas for your books or somewhere else?
Usually, yeah. I think I often start with an emotion. So like something that I've felt. Sometimes it's something that I felt that I remember feeling when I was in middle school. And often it's something that I've then felt since. Like Up for Air really came out of a feeling of embarrassment after messing up and feeling like everybody's eyes were on me, and how do you bounce back from that? And St. Ivy came out of a feeling of like wanting to be a good person and a kind friend, and sometimes having jealous feelings inside that you don't know what to do with, or resentful feelings that you don't know what to do with. So I think I tend to be like an emotion first person, and I start with a feeling that that I've like felt deeply and that's been puzzling in some way to me. And then I give it to a character and see what I can work through. I did also teach middle school for a long time. And so that also informs my writing a lot. Like with St. Ivy, I really wanted to delve into the pressure I saw a lot of students have to have like one thing that made them stand out. And so I wrote about a kid who isn't so sure what her thing is. And so she really goes all in on trying to be kind all the time because she thinks that's what makes her special. And Up for Air, I had some students who were really outstanding athletes and ended up on teams with high school aged kids. And I was really interested in how they could completely keep up with their peers in some ways often, but then socially and emotionally, they were at a different stage sometimes. So it's kind of a combination of things I felt myself, things I remember from middle school, and things that I saw my students dealing with.
That's so interesting. I don't think I've heard any other authors say that they focus on that emotion first. And I love that because you can see that throughout all of your books. It travels throughout the storyline and the theme. So that's awesome. I love that. Now, you started talking a little bit about how, your stories come to play. Would you say then that you are a plotter or a pantser?
But that's a good question. I have become more of a plotter, as you know, that I have my last couple of books I've sold on proposal, which means like you have to give them a plot, basically. And that works better for me sometimes than others. I kind of need to do a back and forth of like first spending a lot of time with the characters and their emotions. Then I can figure out what I think is going to happen. But this book fought me every step of the way. And what I thought was going to happen just didn't work. It sounded really good in an outline, like it convinced my publisher, but it didn't quite work when I came to it. So I had to be shifting as I went. Whereas my next book that comes out in 2022, the outline actually worked, thank goodness. So, and I don't think it was really, I think there was just, there were things that I hadn't quite puzzled out in terms of the character growth that then meant like, I'm such an emotion first, character first writer that if it doesn't quite feel right, if it sounded good in theory, but doesn't quite feel right emotionally, I just have to go back to that core and kind of re-problem solve from there. But I do a bit of both. I'm like a plantser, I guess.
I was in another event this afternoon and someone actually used the term plantser, and I love that. So I think it's cool. You have a combination of both plotting, but you also kind of fly by the seat of your pants and you make that magic come through. I love it. Amy, what about you? What is your creative process like?
I often wish I was more of a plotter. I wish I could just, before I started the book, just knew exactly what was going to happen, but that never works for me. Graphs, up and down points, and that doesn't seem to work for me very well either. But listening to a lot of podcasts from K.M. Weiland, that did click with me. And she, it's like every 10,000 words, something has to change big time in the book. That was really important for me to kind of understand. Like at the 50% mark, your character has to go from wanderer to warrior. And even, where the climax of the story and the resolution or the first plot point is at like between 20 and 25%. So I at least have some idea of where I'm going. And then I start writing. I'm very character driven. Plot is hard for me. And I know that our characters have to do something. But I'm also very led by emotion and feeling. So that plantser, term resonates very much. I kind of know where I'm headed, but I feel like I'm always typing and writing on the edge. I'm never quite sure what's going to happen. And it's fascinating to me how the mind and your characters take you places that you didn't know you were going.
Leslie, what about you?
I think I am team pantser. I'm just pantser all the way. Somewhere in there, though, I guess I'll just have to get some direction, and I may make a note or two. But what I really love is really seeing that movie in my head and then just kind of like going from there. That's really what makes it fun for me, what makes it engaging, what makes my characters come alive, because I tend to have probably more than people can keep up with sometimes. And I love that. And I don't want to lose that. And I know that I won't. People tell me if I plot and if I outline, but I haven't gotten to that point, and I love the way that I do it so far. So I am a person who just likes to open up the document, get that character in my mind, and then just start with the story. And then once I get a draft of that, I'll go back and say, hey, I did, what's happening here. I'll do that in maybe the draft. But I'm going to see the movie and start typing.
I love that. It reminds me of something that another middle grade author, Leah Henderson, has said.
Mm-hmm.
She has said that she literally has conversations with her characters in between writing. So if she takes a break from the computer or wherever she is, she'll be talking to her characters. And I think that's genius because you can connect with them more that way. And I know as, a reading teacher, I'm constantly trying to help my students see that movie in their head while they're reading. And I thought that was genius. So I'm happy to hear that you do that yourself.
Oh, I love Leah. And I haven't heard her say that, but I kind of thought everyone talked to their characters. Maybe not, but yeah, that's what I do. They talk to me and I talk to them, and we're having a full-fledged dialogue. and speaking of that, it really helps me with dialogue. Hearing that character, I have to hear that voice to write dialogue. And if you've read either of my books, they're very dialogue heavy. I love talking. So that's why I'm going to stop now and let someone else go, because I can go on and on and on. Okay.
Jarrett, what about you?
Okay.
Did you say me?
Yes, go ahead.
Oh, okay. I love listening to all you guys. It's so fascinating and fun to hear all you guys talk. So I think I have a somewhat similar approach as Leslie. I tend to pants like crazy, and I have a notebook here. So I also draw and write at the same time. I start all my books longhand. So I tend to get my group of characters and situations, and then I just draw and write, and I just dump everything into notebooks, and I just sort of go wild. I don't really worry about story. And sooner or later, little bits of stories, little anecdotes sort of start to unfold and come to me. And sort of once I feel like I've exhausted all I can do with whatever element or characters, whatever settings I have, I usually go back and then, put on the plotter hat, take off the pants and put on the plotter hat. I shouldn't say take off the pants in a deceptive but then I sort of, from all of that madness, I try to impose a structure, go back and do a new draft. So I guess I pants and then plot.
Mae.
Yeah, I could talk about process all day because I find it so fascinating and very inspiring. I've been taking notes as you've all been talking. And so I am a reformed pantser. My debut was pretty much completely pants, and I think you can sort of tell a little, at least I can, when I read it back. That was definitely the book where I just got my feet wet and tried to understand how to write a full novel with an arc and emotions and all those things. But, like Laurie, my next couple of books were sold on proposal. And so that's sort of suddenly becomes a shift, because when I was pantsying my book, I was doing it, in between life, like when my kids were sleeping, or if I felt inspired, or if I had little moments here and there. But that took me a long, long time. And then when you suddenly have someone waiting and giving you a deadline, you're like, I can't just pants the whole thing. So I tend to start off with a very loose outline, but it's a very fluid one that changes as I'm getting to know my characters. But before I write, I spend a ton of time not putting any words on page, just ruminating. So a little bit like Jarrett, and I have, I've got, my notebook full of just same thing, just notes and observations. And I spend a lot of time trying to understand my themes and what the emotional push is of the book. And it's not until I feel really comfortable that I have somewhat of a grasp on those things that I really start looking at my outline and then actually writing. But for all of my books, they've all very much shifted from what I thought the book was going to be to the end. And that was really as I got to know, the main characters and their wants and trying to understand who they are from the interior. And actually, since we're talking about craft books and things like that, so I've been rereading this. This is The Emotional Craft of Fiction. And this has been just a great book to understand, like how to just dig a little bit deeper. Because my favorite books are the books that really do have that emotional push. I love to cry and I love to laugh. So I always try to aim to learn something about that as I'm writing my books. So I wish I could be a pantser, but it's a good problem to have if you have a deadline. So
as you guys are talking, I'm thinking about these notebooks and all of the work that you do to get ready to write. And for a lot of people, sticking with something like writing, which is so labor intensive and can be very, very daunting and exhausting, is tough. So is there something that you guys do that is an activity you do every single day or regularly that keeps you motivated? And Jarrett, I'm going to start with you, because I feel like we've talked about this before, where you do something in the morning every day and it helps you get ready to draw and get ready to write. So could you tell us a little bit about what you do to stay motivated and to get ready to write during the day? I think we may have lost Jarrett.
Oh, no, I'm here. You cut out for a second.
No problem.
Sorry, you cut out for a second. I didn't know you threw it to me. So how do I stay motivated during the day? Well, so one thing that has changed a lot for me is 4 years ago, I became a parent, and I really had to learn how to create on demand and make the most of the time I had, whether it was 5 minutes or 5 hours. And so I really had to train myself to quickly sink down into a project, however much time I had. And a lot of times, if the kid goes down for a nap, you never know if they're going to sleep for 2 hours or 2 minutes. There's a lot of curveballs. So one of the ways I stay motivated is just to know how precious the time I have is, and just to try to make the most of it. The other thing, Laurie and then Mae touched upon this, is having a deadline and knowing that sort of your career and your longevity and you've got people waiting on you is really motivating. But I don't think I could have done that at the beginning of my career. Like you were talking about, like Mae and Leslie said, becoming more plotters and selling books on proposal and then having due dates. That is really motivating. Knowing that you've got a team waiting on you and potentially sending you a lot of nudge emails and stuff like that. So try to make the most of my time and accomplish my goals and all of that stuff is very motivating. But even that being said, there are still some times when, I sit down to write and it's just not happening. And I think one of the worst things you can do is beat yourself up over that. Sometimes you just got to grab a book by someone else and just fill the well of inspiration instead of trying to bang your head against your own work.
That's true.
It's very true. And, you know, if you're in a situation where you're having that block or you don't have it in you, grabbing a book, reading for a little bit, or doodling. I know, Jarrett, you're a big, doodler. Those are things that can help get it out. So those are excellent, excellent strategies. How about you, Mae? What is something that you do to keep you motivated and really creative and in that good space so that you can produce?
Well, I'm going to pilfer off of Jarrett a little bit because a lot of what he said resonates with me. I am very pointed when I know that I have writing time. So meaning that I try to set a goal, however big or small. It could be like revise 2 paragraphs, or it could be, figure out this part of the story. I try to keep that in my head as I know that I have writing time, because I'm the type of person who can ruminate all day. And unless I keep myself in check, then suddenly my 1 hour is gone, and then I can't write anymore. So I do a little bit of that, but same thing, filling the well is so important, whatever that means to you. When I'm finding myself stuck with my words, I read a lot. I read a lot of poetry. Sometimes the melody of words helps me jog something. And, finding myself in a good headspace in the morning. I always start with coffee or tea and by myself. I might do a little meditation, or I might, go out for a walk or a run. But to have that time in my head with nobody else, it helps me so much as I'm sitting down to write. So I always try to start my day with a little bit of filling the well and finding some headspace.
I love that image of just sitting down with a coffee and just getting into your headspace. It's something that I strive towards, but I'm a sleeper, so I haven't experienced that much yet. How about you, Laurie? What keeps you going?
Good question. I mean, there are a lot of my process honestly during the pandemic has just been wild, because I've been with my kids all the time, and I would love to start the day alone, but just with kids sleep and everything, I've mostly had night and like kind of late at night. And then there's honestly the urgency of like, I'd really like to go to bed sometime. So that's a good motivator. But for me, I do, in the best of circumstances, it's great for me to be able to like get some exercise. There was a stretch where I was able to meditate before writing or get some exercise before sitting down to write, and that definitely helps. I find that I need that help with motivation most in the drafting stages. Like, it's a lot easier for me to stay motivated once I'm revising something, but in that early stages, I have to kind of bargain with myself more and say, like, I will set a timer and say, okay, you don't feel like writing, you have to do it for 20 minutes. And if you still don't feel like it after 20 minutes, you can go do something else, but you got to do the 20 minutes. And most of the time I will get into something and want to keep going. But that's the stage that I have to like make those deals that early in a book stage.
That reminds me of the Pomodoro method, which I've been using a lot lately, where you have a task that you want to get completed. You have 25 minutes, you work, you shut off the phone, you don't check email, and you stay focused for that time. And then you get to take a 5-minute break. And then you continue and you do another round or two, and then you can take a longer break. And I think that's something that is so good for writers, because, you have to have that time to kind of meditate over what's going on within the characters' minds and the conflict of the text. And, Amy, I'm going to throw the question to you, but I also want to add on to it is, do you guys have a set goal, either daily or weekly, that helps motivate you or helps keep you on track? And what does that look like?
Fear is a big, especially in the early days, fear is a really good motivator for me. I remember, just years and years writing this book, thinking I've spent years on this and it might never go anywhere. And just feeling really stubborn about, I've got to make it go somewhere. And then what a wonderfully awesome break that I got. It was published. And then I didn't want to be one and done. I got to get that second book out. So, yes, I think it's really important to know yourself. When do I work best? I work best in the morning. So every single day in my planner, I write exercise, write 1 hour. And if I can get an hour, that's such a win. In the earlier days, it was nap time. And that's very motivating. Like Jarrett said, you might have 2 minutes, you might have 2 hours. Wow, that's really amazing. I think each one of my books, though, started with NaNoWriMo, which is National Novel Writing Month. And if I kind of know I've got to hit 1,400 words a day, I'll have 50,000 words at the end of the month, and I've got a first draft. And that is so much easier for me to work with than the blank screen.
Leslie, what about you?
Well, listening to everyone, the best thing that I do, first thing I do, I like to wake up really early. I wake up at 5, maybe 5:30. And I love to start my day that way. So waking up really early and getting on my way is the best motivator for me. I just feel like I heard Toni Morrison, that when she had her young kids, she would wake up at 5. Somewhere that ingrained in me, and I stuck with it. So I always believe that's the time that I should wake up. So I compensate for that by going to bed early, or whenever I can. But so waking up early, I can't necessarily say that as soon as I wake up I write. Maybe I'll start writing around 6 or so. And I've been very fortunate that I haven't had a moment where the quote unquote well is even thinking about running dry, because keep in mind, this publishing journey for me has been, I'm sure for a lot of people have their stories, it's really right at 20 years before I even had my first book published. So now I'm thinking, oh my gosh, how can I get all these stories out? So it's like you have so much to say, so much that you want to say, that I think my issue is, how do I think that I don't have to say everything in one story? It's not about, oh, I'm running out of things to write about. It's like I've written maybe 3 stories in this one book. So I need to pull those out, make that another book, and go back to this particular storyline. So I think I struggle with that. So the creative process for me is just waking up, understanding the gift that I have to be able to write, that that other projects I want to pursue, and just letting that happen.
Jarrett, do you set specific goals when you start a new project, whether it's, chapters or pages or words? How do you organize your time knowing that you want to get this done?
Well, before I answer that, I was going to say something else I do to sort of, which is related to this question. At the end of a day, I often either stop what feels like prematurely, or I spend a minute at the end of my writing day figuring out what I need to do next. And I often leave my desk or wherever I'm working with that in mind. So I sort of know exactly where I'm going to pick up tomorrow, and I sort of give myself a task, whether it's large or small, for the next day. And that often helps me sink down into it.
I like that.
Yeah, it's really helpful. And I'd say in terms of goals for a specific day, it really depends on the part of the process I'm at. If I'm just drafting and I'm just pantsing and just like vomiting into a notebook, I don't have many goals or plans. I'm just sort of exploring, and I just sort of think of that as like a playground. I'm just playing, and you never really have goals or plans when you're playing. But then when it gets to revision and stuff like that, I do have more clear goals about how much I need to get done or how much I need to get written. And it's often just measured out in terms of my deadline, and then what I have going on in my life and what else I have to juggle besides working on that book. But it starts to come in then. But often I like to give myself smaller goals, especially for the beginning of the next day.
Okay, jump in here, Nicole. I love what you said, Jared, about just leaving, and I read that somewhere too, and I really have taken a hold of that. I do that with dialogue. Like if I'm in a great dialogue, I'll stop. And so then when I come back the next day, I can just jump back into that dialogue. And I just love doing that. And that's one thing that I try to do, stop where I'm at this action. And when I come back, jump back into that. And sometimes it helps take the story in a direction that is even more exciting than when you had that stream and you were working on that. So yeah, I love just stopping in the middle and medias res. I love that.
I think that's a great strategy too. I totally agree. I never would have thought to have done it during dialogue though, because I know for me, I would worry that I would lose the flow of the conversation, but I can actually see what you're saying, Leslie. It makes sense. It gives you that other starting point. So, we have just a couple of minutes and we've talked about the beginning of the process. We've talked about ways to stay motivated and so forth, and a little bit about your books, but are there any projects that you guys can tell us about that we can look forward to? Maybe even an event, or if you have a book that you can give us a little preview of. I know that the audience would love to hear it. So, Mae, can we start with you?
I'm so proud of this book, How to Win a Slime War, and largely because I was able to complete it and revise it and turn it in during the pandemic, which was a really good thing. Thank you, for me to do with my kids at home and my day job at home and, all those things. So this is the one I'm going to plug, and this is out on September 14th. This is all about a boy named, he's a Filipino-American boy named Alex, and Alex just wants to stand out. He wants to find his voice, and the way he tries to do that is by entering the slime war at school. And it's a super top secret thing that the admin, they don't want them to do the slime war. So they get into a bunch of hijinks, and it's really funny and tender, and I hope you will check this out.
I love it. I love it. Laurie, how about you? What's coming up next?
Well, I have another book that will come out next spring, and it's called Coming Up Short. And if you know my book Up for Air, you will recognize the setting in Coming Up Short, because the main character ends up going to Gray Island, which is the place that this book takes place. It's a fictionalized island off the coast of Massachusetts. And it's another sporty book. It's about a softball star who self-destructs on the field during the biggest game of her young career after a very public scandal involving her dad. And she ends up going to Gray Island to stay with her estranged aunt and attend a softball camp that's run by her idol, where she's hoping that she'll be able to fix her throw to first base and maybe even her family. So that I've written almost all of that book during the pandemic, which has been hard, but it's also really saved me in a lot of ways to just have that to prioritize at a time when I think my own writing would have gotten really buried otherwise. So I'm proud of it and excited for it. And I'm also just like grateful that I had it to keep me going lately.
Amy?
Yeah, with this 10,000 Tries being so new, really trying to get the word out about that. There's a lot of humor, but I would also say it's a tearjerker. And my next one, I just sold it, which I was so excited about, and I really would love to turn it into a series. And it's very different. It's about 6 very naughty children, and it's a little bit younger level, and their nanny is a miniature schnauzer. So I said that I wrote realistic fiction, but this dog, he's very real to me, and that's been very interesting, getting into the mind of a dog. But really, really excited about that.
That sounds awesome. I love it. I can't wait to hear more about that. That's great. Leslie, what are you working on?
Well, I will talk about my book that's less than 2 weeks old. I can't see. Forever This Summer. Now, Forever This Summer was mostly revised, and I did a lot of revision during the pandemic. So if you want to know why there's lots of food, lots of picnics and parties and kisses and hugs and just family fun, you'll know, because I was home alone. So I look back. I mean, reading this book just makes me just hungry. It's based in Louisiana, and it's actually a fictionalized version of my hometown, Bogalusa, Louisiana, which is just fun to say, Bogalusa, Louisiana. And when I read it, or when I was thinking about it, it's just so much fun and music and life. And I'm thinking, oh, I was longing for those things, and there they are in the book. So if you notice all that, that is why. But I'm very proud of Forever This Summer, and it's only been out a couple weeks, and I'm just looking forward to see what it's going to do. And I will be at Books of Wonder coming up within the next 2 weeks, well, maybe a little longer. We haven't set on a date yet. So look for me there.
That little tidbit of information is so helpful for me as an educator, because when I show my students that book, I'm going to say to them, well, what are some of the things that you notice in there? And when they say food and parties and things like that, I can share with them, well, these are the things that she was, yearning for during the pandemic.
Oh, yes.
I think that
don't promise that you're going to cook them, because unless you're unless you can cook gumbo and shrimp etouffee, is big Louisiana food in there. So they'll be like, "Ooh, let's go to a restaurant."
Oh, I love it! I love it! I can see a field trip right now.
Thank you,
Jarrett. You are the last one. So, what is in the works for you?
I'm hungry after listening to Leslie talk. And I love that you wrote all that wonderful togetherness in that book during such an isolating time. It's awesome. I have a couple more books in my Giger the Robot series coming out. These are early chapter books. I've got the Hunger Heroes graphic novel coming out. And then next year, I've got that realistic book I mentioned, the realistic fiction. It's an illustrated novel in verse, and I'll be talking a lot more about that at the end of this year and beginning of next year. And I am excited to be appearing with Mae and Chris Barron in August at a bookstore event, Books Inc., I think. And you can find more info about that on our websites and stuff. But yeah, that's what I've got coming up now.
Very exciting. I feel as if August is like the book month. All of a sudden, there's so many different events happening at bookstores, and then Middle Ground Book Fest, and so many great things that are happening in the literary world, which is awesome for teachers because we're going back to school then, so we can bring all of these books back and all of the book buzz that I tend to talk about with my kiddos. So I hope everyone out there has enjoyed this behind the scenes look at being an author. And I wanted to thank everyone for joining me tonight. And hopefully this was a way to really, motivate others to jump into that author's seat and get some stories written down or appreciate them just a little bit more. So thank you for joining us, and have a great day, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.